This is a laptop. You already have one of these most likely. You either have a Windows laptop or you have an Apple laptop, or maybe you have a desktop. But this laptop here, this has a special use case. It's part of my workflow. And in this video, I want to share with you why every web developer will eventually need or start using a laptop like this one. Now, what makes this laptop so special? Is it the hardware inside it? Is it the name brand? Is it the specs? Is it the version of the operating system I'm using? I'm going to go over all of that in this video. But before we get there, I want to explain why, in my opinion, this is something you're going to need. And to do that, I want to talk about what a web developer learning cycle is pretty much like, or what their career cycle is like. When you're first starting to code, whether it's HTML, CSS, if you're learning JavaScript, if you're learning Python or PHP, if you're working with databases like MySQL or MariaDB, pretty much any equipment that you have is going to do just fine. I know there's always a big debate going on, and in another video I'll talk about what the best operating system is and why it may not even matter, because pretty much what you could do on macOS, you can do on Windows. There's ways around things. There's configurations you can set up. And then you also have the Windows subsystem for Linux, which gives you a lot of the same features that you have in macOS. But the learning process for a web developer, for a coder, for a programmer, is first learning how to code. Once you know how to code, once you know how to create a program, eventually you're going to get your website online. You're going to start taking on clients. You're going to get their websites online. And you're probably going to be using a shared hosting plan with one of the large hosting companies out there. Your shared hosting account will come with probably a cPanel, or will come with Plesk, which is the graphical user interface for how you're going to manage your server. And in the beginning, that's fine. For smaller websites, that's probably fine. But without diving too deep into the differences between shared hosting, VPSs, and dedicated servers, just want to give you a brief overview. A shared hosting account that comes in at about, $5 a month, maybe $10 a month, that they offer you unlimited bandwidth, unlimited storage, unlimited everything. How can they offer you so much for so little? Well, one of the ways they do that is that they put in as many websites, as many instances of websites on one shared server. So think about it like an apartment building. If you're in a major sky-rise apartment building, you're going to have hundreds of people within that building. When it comes to shared hosting, you could have thousands of other websites right next to yours. Now, what does that mean? If you understand how computers work and how data centers work and how web servers work, you're going to have that many websites all utilizing resources from the computer itself. That means performance is going to be an issue, especially for larger websites. And that also means that security is something you're going to want to be concerned about. So what typically happens is a web developer, a web designer will decide that they want to step away from shared hosting and get into a VPS, a virtual private server, or even a dedicated server. Now, what this means is that your instance of your website, of your server, has dedicated resources for it. Even as a VPS, there might still be other instances of web servers on it as well, but you're typically going to have dedicated resources, meaning your particular server is going to have, let's say, 4 gigabytes of RAM or maybe 8 gigs of RAM. You're going to have not unlimited storage, but you really don't need to have unlimited storage, but you'll have access to very fast SSDs. And all those resources are dedicated just for you. So you're not going to have the performance bottlenecks that you would have with a shared hosting account. All right, so now one thing you're going to have to also remember is that when you get a VPS, when you get a dedicated server, you get to control pretty much what types of software goes on it. Straight out the box, you're not going to have a cPanel, you're not going to have Plesk. And really, that's a good thing because that's software that takes resources away from your web application. So how will you interact with your website, with your web server? Via the terminal.
Accessing. System stable. System shutdown.
Yes, you're going to have to get familiar with the command line. You're going to have to learn how to secure copy information from your local environment to your remote server. SCP is one way to do that. You could also use rsync. And SFTP is another way for you to transfer your project from your local environment to your production environment. You're also going to have to learn about file permissions and folder permissions, users and groups, things of that nature, how to manage everyone that's on your server itself, whether it's just you or if you're going to have a team working on it. Who has access to what? There's going to be configuration files you're going to have to get familiar with when it comes to Linux, when it comes to the type of server you're using. If you're using Apache for the web server, you can really fine tune the performance of your website and your server by working with the configuration files. So that takes me back to this. Every web developer needs a laptop like this. This is an old laptop. It is a 2012 Lenovo Yoga. It's the first iteration that they have of this design style where it's able to flip out and pretty much end up being a tablet and stuff. This laptop here, what I did is I completely took off Windows and I just installed Ubuntu as the operating system. And I installed the version of Ubuntu that I'm using on my production server. And then what I do is I created a mirror copy or a mirror image or cloned what I have in my production setup onto this local development setup here. That means I get to test out my ideas. I get to work with Linux locally. See if any changes to the code that I'm pushing out is going to have any breaking changes. And it's better to learn that immediately in your local environment before you upload it to your production environment. Now I know people are scratching their heads. They're saying, well, I can create my website in Windows. I can create my website on a macOS operating system. I can pretty much just use the same version of PHP, the same version of MySQL, or the same version of Python locally as I do remotely. So why would I need something like this? And like I said, that's true. You can do everything on Windows and macOS, and that's perfectly fine. That's how I did it for years. But it comes back towards the working with file permissions, folder permissions, users and groups, making sure that your development environment reflects what you have in your production environment. Now, I'm not saying to go get one of these laptops brand new, spend $2,000 on it, and then just wipe out Windows and throw on Ubuntu. I mean, if you want to, you could do that, but there's better options if that's what you want. You can always get a laptop that was made specifically for Linux, and they do exist. But like I said earlier, this is an older laptop. I've had this since 2012. I'm not really using it for anything else. So I figured instead of just junking it, instead of just tossing it aside, why not repurpose it? Why not reduce, reuse, and recycle? So I wiped out Windows and I installed Linux, and now this is my playground. This is what I use to test out my ideas. And if you're like me, you probably have more than one laptop or more than one desktop lying around. Trust me, I have a whole entire computer lab setup. And it's not all modern equipment. It's stuff that I've carried over throughout the years, and I decided that, you know what, I want to repurpose them. Now, if you don't have one of these, you probably have a friend or you probably have a family member that has all the technology that you can ask them, say, hey, if you're going to get rid of it, if you're going to upgrade, let me take that laptop off your hands. Maybe you throw them a couple of dollars. Or you can go to eBay and you can get yourself one of these older laptops for a very low cost, probably like $100, maybe $200. And once you get it, wipe out the hard drive, make sure you write it over so that way anything that's on it is completely gone. Hook it up to your guest network on your router. Make sure everything gets updated as needed. And then install Linux onto that laptop. And the way you install Linux is you'll take a USB drive. You go to like the Ubuntu website and you download the ISO file for it. Place it onto the USB. You'll plug it into the laptop. You boot into the BIOS. And then you overwrite whatever's there. In another tutorial, I'll go step by step on how to do that process. But I think it's a great way for you to get hands-on with Linux itself, for you to understand deeper how the command line works, how terminal works, how you can do file management, how you can work with databases in an environment that's very similar to your production environment. Now, that being said, there is an alternative. You can download VirtualBox, you can download VMware Community Edition, and you can install Linux onto either one of those virtual technologies. And that's a great option as well. But the one thing you're going to have to remember is that on your host machine, whether it's a laptop or a desktop, you're going to have to make sure you have enough resources for your host machine as well as your virtual machines. And not all laptops will have the capacity for the hard drive or the amount of RAM needed to run multiple virtual machines and your host operating system. But if you do, then VirtualBox is a great option. So like I said, if you are a web developer, if you're getting started or if you've been in the game for a while, one thing you're going to want to invest your money in or invest your time in is taking an older piece of technology, like an old laptop, repurpose it, throw on Linux onto it, and just get your hands dirty in terms of learning how the command line works. Learn about SSH, learn about rsync, secure copy, SFTP, learn about how to manage a server, how to manage the modules and the packages that are loaded onto the operating system. You can take it even deeper and do port management to make sure that only the appropriate or the right ports are being listened to and the rest are disabled if not needed. But by having a laptop like this is a game changer. And again, it doesn't break the bank. All right, so sound off. How many of you are going to actually have a laptop dedicated towards Linux that you could use to enhance your skill set? Let me know down in the comment section below. All right, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, smash that notification icon. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy coding.